any feedback that you've got on whether they're suitable will be gratefully received. The next thing is the service level agreements, and it's something I sometimes think I talk about a lot, and to the extent I'm boring people by talking about them, but I think they're so important to what we're talking about here. Whenever we talk about something we're not getting right, it's often about making sure the expectations are clear on both sides, that we know what we should be delivering and you know what we will be delivering. So the significance of SLAs, I really can't overemphasize. I wrote a short blog post, and there's the address. We are trying to promote our blog because we're not using it as much as we ought to be, but we're using it more and more, and we're starting to put some hopefully useful content out there. So do take a note of the address and do check it out. And I think Frank and New and the guys do use Twitter and various other means of letting you know when there's something new on there. But I did try to outline the significance of a service level agreement, and linking to a number of posts elsewhere on the internet that explained it better than I thought I could. So do check that out if you're not yet convinced of, what's admittedly a fairly dry document. Ultimately, it's the terms and conditions in a similar manner, but it is key. If the SLA doesn't describe the service you're expecting, then we've got it wrong somewhere. So do read them if you can stomach it, and do tell us the things they don't say or the things they say that sound wrong. Okay. I think we've presented before on the list of services that we've outlined. I've spent a lot of time writing these documents, and so far I've written 16 of them. I've got 3 that I've recently done that I haven't yet published, but I will publish to the blog shortly. There are 6 left to do. They are some of the less common, or the services we expect less people to need or go for, but also some of the trickiest ones. So I've got those to do, but you will find 16 documents that cover the vast majority of the key services. So, well, please read them, but the next obvious question is where to find them. At the moment, the blog is our best channel, so where we are updating or revising one we've previously published, we're doing that via a blog post. I will, when I publish the next 3, I will put all of them together so that you've got the latest set all in one place. Those of you who've got far enough along in the process of transition, the service level agreements will form part of your contract pack, so you'll have them as a reference there, and so will we. And ultimately, I think we'd like to get them in the portal. So the portal is currently used for reporting tickets and checking status of support requests, but it seems a logical place for me that you can go and check, and so can we. We can both go to the same place to check the actual specific service level agreement. But this raises a question that I would be keen for those of you who have any thoughts on this about what's happened with other providers that doesn't work or what does work. I'd be very interested. These service level agreement documents can't be a static document. We can't write them once and that's it forevermore. Where I'm asking for feedback on what doesn't work in them, if I get that feedback, I want to correct the documents and update them so that it answers that question or it revises that parameter. So the documents have been evolving slightly since we first started transitioning people, and it's not an unreasonable expectation that they will evolve slightly more as we go even further. But we want to be providing the same service to everybody. If somebody is on Bloom, we want Bloom to mean the same thing. If somebody has the tailored customization service, we want that to mean exactly the same thing for everybody. So we need to find a way of letting that evolve and keeping people up to date. And I've got a few thoughts on that, but as I say, any feedback you have on what you've experienced elsewhere and how that process is managed, please do let us know. The Bloom software itself is the key, really, and unfortunately we chose the name Bloom for both the software, or the application, the service, and the range of services, and then we introduced Bonsai, which actually is, at the moment, and as far as we intend for the future, the same software. So at the moment, we're still calling it the Bloom software, but if we can come up with a better name for that, we will. But what we've been doing, and what we certainly say in the service level agreements that we will do, is at the very least quarterly upgrades. So those of you who've been with us for some time will know that the once a year big upgrade of two Moodle versions is quite a big deal, both for us in terms of logistics and time, and for you in terms of impact. We subscribe to the view that doing something painful more often is actually the answer. So quarterly, I would love to go even further than that and have smaller upgrades more often, so that each impact is actually fairly manageable and people can cope with an ever-evolving service. Moodle doesn't always make that easy for us. They sometimes introduce fairly significant changes that do need planning if you're halfway through a term or an academic year. So we have to take that into account and plan what we do. But we said we would aim for quarterly upgrades, and we're partway through the process of doing the first set. So the summer we followed a fairly standard process of big upgrade through the summer. We're now 2 weeks into rolling out an interim upgrade, first quarterly upgrade. So it's early days. We would like feedback on things like release notes, the process itself. Something we've learned is that we are considering, we may seriously have to look at doing weekends if we're going to do quarterly upgrades, and there is always going to be some impact of those upgrades in terms of downtime or read-only time. So we acknowledge that impact is difficult to handle in your institutions. So weekends is a possibility that we need to explore and see how we can do it. Roadmap is the other aspect. We've made some progress on the service level foundation of what we do, and we've built in the concept of a standardized set of software that we think is good, but we need to lay out a roadmap for that software. What do we plan to add to it in terms of features that we develop, third-party features that we bring in, and so on. We've started a process internally of trying to map that out further ahead in a bit more detail. And in future user groups, I think we'd like to work with you guys on, here's our thoughts on the roadmap, help steer us, should things come earlier, later, things we've missed, things that you don't actually want, and so on. But the one key thing I think we want to share at the moment is that March, April 2015, we are aiming to bring in Moodle 2.8. So from that point forward, with an upgrade time to be discussed and arranged with individual people, that's where we're headed. So we can talk to you guys about more detail about anything in 2.8 that you're worried about, concerned about, excited about, whatever it may be. So the roadmap session later on, do feed in your thoughts of things that we should be doing, and give us some sense of whether they're things we should be focused on right now, or whether they're things for a year's time, or whether they're one day we'd love to have this. A brief bit about management changes. So last time we had a double act of myself and John Hilton. John Hilton was interim head of learning and learning technology services. He's no longer doing that. He's gone off to focus on some of the analytics work and things we're thinking about. So for the time being, at least, I'm fulfilling both roles. So in a way, we're going back to how it was a long time ago, operating as one unit. So Richard Havinger, Toby Young, essentially we see them, we're all working towards the same end, which is delivering these services to you. So essentially, come to me for any of the things that you would have gone to John or me about. And if I can't satisfy you, you've got the usual routes of Richard Maccabee. So again, talk to me individually if you've got concerns or questions around that. And okay, a bit about where we think we should be next time. And I don't think we've set a date, but I'm guessing we'll be meeting again something like March or April. We expect to be closer to completion of the Bloom Bonsai transition. I'm guessing something like 3/4 of the way through customer base. We are working through an order of priority in terms of renewal dates and various other criteria, but we've got 100 or so to get through, and some of them are time consuming. So I don't expect us to have completed that. If we have, I'll be very happy. I expect all of these service level agreements for all of the services to be written and published and feeding into actual customer services where appropriate. I think we should have a new contract ready for use with Bloom, and we can talk, when it's ready, we'll start talking to individual customers that are next on the list and sanity check whether it's appropriate for that. Yeah, I thought this was important to say. I expect us to be much more bedded in with delivery of the Bloom and Bonsai service levels. So in some cases, we've set ourselves fairly demanding service levels to meet, which we should. But some of those things will take us time to bed in and actually make sure we have the data produced reliably, quickly, that we're adjusting our processes that are missing. And we'll be planning the rollout of Moodle 2.8 and a series of upgrades and so on as per usual. And that, I think, is it. So we've hopefully got plenty of time for questions on any of that, really. Yeah, really. There are a few. Yeah. We probably have certainly less than 10. It's probably about half a dozen or so customers who have a full-blown European tender where our reading of it is that we can't just go in and say, under the terms of this, we're wiping out that service and replacing it with this one with a different pricing structure because of competition rules and so on, that anybody else who failed to win that tender might flag and say, well, if I'd known that's what you're going to end up with, we'd have gone for something different. So we're prioritising some of the others, but clearly a customer, I believe, has certain freedoms around a tender to start over again, but I think that has to be driven by them. We can't come to you and say, you must go for one of these and these are the prices. But I think there are options, and and we can talk about that, because we still think that the Bloomer Bonsai is a better defined and better service than some of those things. So it's frustrating for us to be restricted by them as much as it might be for you guys. So keen. There certainly are. So we could let you know who those are. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, indeed. And I'm not an expert on OU tenders, so we just know it's an area we need to tread carefully. Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you about the e-learning project that I've been running at the Royal College of Midwives for the last 5 years, in fact. But I think, first of all, it might be helpful just to put into context exactly what the Royal College of Midwives is, because I got this feeling as I've been talking to everybody today that I'm in a very, very different situation to most of you here. And although the Royal College of Midwives has that word college in it, it's not a college at all. It is, first of all, a trade union. And you may well have seen more recently, well, very recently, the action that we've been taking over NHS pay. We're campaigning currently for a payment of 1% uplift for all staff and above inflation pay rises for next year as well. It's the first time in our history that we've ever taken strike action in this way. So very importantly, we are a trade union. But we're also, as in call the midwives, I guess, we are an educational association, a professional association, and we provide educational opportunities for our members and have done for, I would think about a century, providing advice and events. And now, today, we are providing online learning opportunities for our members. And just to give a broader understanding of that, we are not the registration body for midwives. The NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, is the registration body, but midwives are required to undertake 30 hours of continuing professional development over a 3-year period, and that is to be increased to 40 hours from this coming year, and there's all sorts of changes to the revalidation process for midwives. They have to go to midwives. We just want to provide them with opportunities to do that CPD. So in terms of CPD, midwives can do anything. They can just sit in a corner and read an article, and that can be considered as CPD. They can attend an event, they can go to a lecture or whatever, and that's all part of their continuing professional development. So 5 years ago, I can't believe it's nearly 5 years ago, I applied and got the job at the Royal College of Midwives to develop e-learning for midwives. To my shock and horror on my first day, I realised that they'd already commissioned a bespoke e-learning environment, which was going to cost them a huge amount of money, and that they hadn't only signed the contracts, they'd paid for the thing as well, although we hadn't seen it. And they'd decided that a tiny video company in the wilds of Wiltshire would build this for them. So I thought, well, okay, I've taken this job now. I was going to recommend at that point, go with Moodle, just, do that. But no, I had to work with this bespoke e-learning environment, which we named iLearn. What we offer is completely free to our members. Now, midwives don't have to be members of our organisation, but I think we've got about 90% of midwives in this country who are members of our organisation. We offer them now over 50 e-learning courses, and we provide e-learning at all different levels, not just at the very top level, academic level of earning. We do modules from how to wash your hands to 30 hours of leadership learning. So not only was I tasked with setting up this e-learning environment, I was also tasked with setting up an e-portfolio. And our little video company out in which said, we'll build it for you. And I said, no, you won't. We will go with Mahara. And I made them make Mahara work with this bespoke e-learning environment. Didn't work very well, but it did work. So that's the sort of background. Now, our original iLearn project, at the end of it, we'd got 11 new users coming in every day and signing up for 25 new courses. I couldn't see our new environment failing. It had to match these figures. It had to be as successful as, and I have to say our small little video company in Wiltshire did come up with the goods because our e-learning environment did work and it was a great introduction for our members. But I was the one that said, I think we have to go to something else. I think we have to move to something different. So, of course, I wouldn't be here if we hadn't gone for Moodle. I'd be somewhere else. But, of course, we did go for Moodle, and we went to Moodle for the obvious reasons of things like sustainability, flexibility, scalability, all of those things. And as well, the user population that can support us. With our little video company, it was me, just me, using that environment. Nobody else could help me. Nobody else could see what was needed. So when I said, oh, I need another question type, they'd go, oh, I don't know about that, that's going to be expensive. Or I said one day, I'd really like a glossary that I could put into each course. Oh, we can't do that, that's just far too difficult. So there were things like that all the time. So to me, always, I was thinking, if I had Moodle, I'd be able to do this, and I'd be saying at work, if we had Moodle, I was planting the seeds from the very beginning, if we had Moodle, we could do this, but we can't do that at the moment. So a decision was finally taken. We were about 3.5 years into the project when a decision was taken to move to Moodle. But this was quite a big decision because obviously it was another upfront cost for us. We're a membership organisation. The only money we get in is from our members' subscriptions, plus some organisations that support the Royal College of Midwives. So having made this decision, my task then was to make this thing work. And we chose Ulcc to work with us, who also helped make it work. So what did we do to make it work for this? And I have to say, midwives are not that tuned and things like that, and accessing stuff online, well, they're not great at that, and a lot of them say they don't like that. So it's really quite a challenge to make a project like this work. Also, in a membership organisation, there's no requirement for anybody to do any of our e-learning. They can do it if they want. Equally, they can just ignore our e-learning offer. So it had to be something that would pull users in. It's a membership benefit for them, but equally, if they didn't like it, they wouldn't come. And given the success of the previous project, I really needed to make sure that this project was going to succeed. So, ease of access. This ease of access has really only just come online, but we've had a new website, and it says down there, access to iLearn. That's all I have to do is click on it, put in their membership number, put in their password, and then they're into the Moodle site. So that was a biggie for us, making it easy for them to log in. So ease of use, well, this isn't the whole front page, but we've divided our courses up into 6 different categories, which makes sense to our members. So things like professional and practice is all the real midwifery stuff that I won't go into here. I won't mention all those things that go on in the midwifery stuff. But we've also got learning that's around 10-minute updates. So kind of coffee break learning. If they've got 10, not that they do often have, but if they have got 10 minutes at work, they can actually log into iLearn and do 10 minutes of how to wash your hands. A simple course like that gets rave reviews about what a good reminder it is about hand washing and the importance of it. So a section on career development with things around leadership, around CV building, all sorts of general things that can enhance their careers. Courses around research. There's a lot of midwives who are very into research, becoming consultant midwives and gaining doctorates, that type of thing. And importantly, our workplace reps, because we are a trade union, so we've got representatives out there organising in the workplace, representing our members, representing them at grievance data. So the interface was important, the ease of use. We need to make it simple in terms of course design. Moodle tends to be, lots of things listed down the page. Well, I knew what they wanted. They wanted to be able to get to the content. So there's a big icon there that says course content. They wanted a forum in case they wanted to raise problems or discuss anything around that particular course content. And most of all, they want their certificates because they want to evidence their learning. So those were the three things I focused on. And every course, well, not quite every course, but most courses look like this. So that it's easy for them to get access to the actual course content. Oh, just going back a bit, authentication of members, that's all done through our website and through our membership, our archaic membership database. But it does work, just about. So we're using the book module mostly for the content. This is a course on genetics, written for us by the NHS Genetics Education. We've got a lot of organisations now who have heard about the success of our e-learning and who are coming to us and saying, can we write a course for you? And Genetics Education was one of those who said, we really want to get this information out to midwives. We won't charge you for the course content. This is what we want, the message we want to get over to midwives. So we've got the book module, we've got the table of contents down the right-hand side there. It does tend to stretch down the page, but nobody's complained about that as yet. But it is something very different from our old e-learning system. There, they were forced to work through every module page by page. They couldn't just look at the table of contents and say, well, actually, I just want to do that section on a particular type of genetic abnormality or revise that. They had to work through page by page. This gives them far greater flexibility. So what made it work in terms of resources? We do a lot of case studies, we do a lot of YouTube video, some video we have made for us, but there's so many resources, as you all know, out on YouTube that we can use that fit what we need. So we make use of that. We do quizzes, that sort of thing. But the biggest thing, and I never realised this until, I don't know, the last 18 months or so, is the e-portfolio in Mahara. iFolio has really changed the way that we approach learning for midwives. For midwives, it's important that they evidence their learning and they understand how their learning impacts on their practice. So they need to have a way of recording that, and the building of an e-portfolio is, and in fact, if they do all our courses, it automatically builds a journal for them. Okay, so the types of courses we've got, from 10 minutes through to, I think I've already said, 15 hours of leadership learning. Anything from hand washing to complex stuff around leadership genetics, perineal repair and all sorts. I can't remember why I put that there, but it must have been important. Oh yeah, it's all levels. It's for all our members. So we've got members who are students, we've got members who are support workers, we've got members at all levels of midwifery, up to heads of midwifery, doctorates in midwifery, and our materials can suit all levels of user. And we're going to be doing more of that in the coming year. But what we do is we certificate all the face-to-face events through iLearn. So if they've been to a face-to-face event, to get their certificate, they have to log on to iLearn and download it from there. They also, and we're developing this more and more, have a range of reflective questions to work through that they put into Mahara. So again, they're building that portfolio of evidence as they go. So iFolio has been equally important and is growing in importance all the time for us. Based on Mahara, of course. It started out as a, well, let's help you get organised. You've got this sort of box of certificates and paperwork under the bed that you get out when you are required. And sometimes they are required to show evidence to the Nursing Midwifery Council, to their supervisor of midwives, the evidence of what they've actually learned over the last 3 years. So Mahara was there really to help them organise that. But it's definitely grown into something else. We've simplified the interface and decided, again, what do they need? They need reflection, they need to know about building their CV, they need a filing area, and they need that make a web page thing, which they all go, oh, I never want to do that. But actually, they do, and they are. The reflective journal has become central to everything I do in an iLearn course as I'm designing the content. So I'm looking at what can they reflect on, what can they think about here that might change the way they are working. So this has become something that I never envisaged really when I started out with putting iFolio and Mahara in place. The course certification. Everything certificated in iLearn goes across to iFolio automatically. So they've only got to start to do one course in iLearn, and that starts to build their portfolio. And the web page, well, we've got universities coming to us and saying, we'd like you to come and do a session on iFolio for our students. We don't want our students using our university e-portfolio. We want them to use the RCM e-portfolio because that carries with them throughout their career. They start it off as a student to this. This is lecturers telling their students, you will become a member of the RCM because you have to, because you need to evidence your work at the end by making a web page in iFolio. We're a bit, well, we're welcoming this to some extent, but on the other hand, we're not quite sure that membership should be forced on student midwives, but there are quite a few establishments that are now doing that. And you'll remember the figures that I put in at the beginning, I think it was 11 and 24 there. We've now got 18 new users a day coming in, and they're booking 36 courses every day. So I think this is a reflection of the success that we've had. We've only been running the project in Moodle for the last 6 months, but it is growing day by day. And this is some of the feedback that we've had. Any questions? But please, if you have got a question, can you shout, because I don't hear very well.
Are there any questions? Jackie?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just on the course design, had certification as one of the options there. You have content and then next to your certification. And they go straight to the certification before the course content. Can they go straight to certification before they do?
No, because they have to work through a full book. We set completion criteria and to go to a full book before they can move on to the evaluation or the final quiz. They then have to do the evaluation before they are allowed to get the certificate. So there are lots of various stages, and they do have to work through every page of the book in order to move on to the next stage. I'll come near you.
Sussex Downs College is largish FE college in South Coast, based in Lewis and Eastbourne. Every year we send about 1,000 students into HE. So some of the things that I'll be talking about here, this is a proving ground for the government theories on how to drive educational initiatives through really sharp funding practices. And in this context, students' learning needs, we've got a big initiative at the moment from the government. You may have heard of NEETs, Not in Education, Employment and Training. We're being driven financially to pick up lots of those. They bring with them lots of specialised learning needs. We have an obligation to identify those and to meet those needs, because if the student drops out, we don't get paid. That's the end of that aspect of it. But we also feel that, and I've spent 40 years as a teacher as well as doing this job, that I can perform my role as a teacher a lot better if I know stuff up front about my students rather than picking it up through the year. So I had a student who was actually a third-year student last year doing A-level further maths who started making complaints about me. It turns out she was dyslexic and she'd never told me. And she told other people in the organisation, but that hadn't got through to me. To meet this then, we have various issues. Growing numbers. The numbers are because of our type of students, but also increased awareness in schools, increased awareness about parents, about things that are inhibiting students' learning. So we are, when our students arrive, on their application form they say, yes, I have additional learning needs. We then have a follow-up on that. We've got a whole team who look after that. Identify them, that's fine. Sitting in a silo of information, we've identified that, we've now applied for the government, we're getting funding for them, but how do we tell the teachers while preserving confidentiality? And confidentiality is a really big deal for all the obvious reasons. We had various approaches like reserve drives on the network and so on, but not entirely satisfactory. Following on from that, customised learning, customised examination arrangements, which I suspect applies in HE as well, but the Joint Council on Qualifications has just initiated a whole new raft of requirements from schools and sixth form colleges and people doing GCSEs. So if the student's saying, hey, I'm dyslexic, the physics teacher has to explain why that's affecting the student's learning. So we have to get information back from the teachers into supporting that. Then how do we get that evidence from teachers? And then administering the arrangements. Basically, again here that, and rightly so if you think about it, that if the student is getting, let's say 25% extra in the exam or getting an amanuensis to write their papers, they should be getting that in all internal assessments as well. And to help them, and so they're not disadvantaged against other students in terms of the monitoring of their progress and the formative assessments. So we've got all of these issues that we faced, and we really never came to a satisfactory solution until I hit upon, oh sorry, here's another one. How do we tell teachers? Again, so we've got this special arrangements, how do we tell teachers? And there's this thing, the ILP. Hands up, how many people have ever heard the phrase ILP? Okay, most people, everybody. There's two words for it, individual learning plan or personalised learning plan. We're using a plugin developed by the Ulcc, which is why I'm here. And it's quite a good product. In fact, nowadays it's a very good product. It's based upon forms that you can build and customise yourself to deliver all sorts of functionality. Initially it was designed for target setting. And the ILP in schools and sixth form college is very much about target setting and monitoring that. But I came up with the idea here of two specific ones. One is called Student Info and one's called Current Learning Support. And within the plugin, you can configure these forms to do various things. So Student Info initially started off as a place where the student could tell their teachers what they'd done. So, hey, I had this about 10 years ago, where a student who was coming into my lessons tired. Why? Well, he was up at 5 a.m. swimming 6 miles because he was a pre-Olympic class swimmer. Give me a completely different perspective on his motivations and abilities. The advantage also of the ILP is that it carries all the wonderful targeting and permissions from Moodle. So we can constrain who can write onto the forms, we can constrain who can see them, we can constrain who can edit them. And in particular, with these two, they are restricted so that only the student who owns the ILP, everything is always visible to the student within the ILP, but only users who in the context of that particular form have got the relevant permissions to see it. So in this case, these forms are available to people who have got the teacher role in the context of that learner. So it manages all the permissions, uses all the wonderful Moodle stuff to maintain confidentiality. Then, this is the kind of stuff that goes in. This is an additional learning support form. You won't be able to read it, but it's saying that this student has got Asperger's syndrome. And it will have been an initial assessment. So the student's been identified at the start of the course, has self-identified as needing this, or may have been referred. The team then identify that, and then identify initially the kind of support that they need. So this student will often require use of a computer, will need extra time in exam. I had a student a few years ago, a very bright student, went on to medical college, who had quite severe Tourette's. I knew about that quite quickly, but other things, she didn't swear. She just used to shout out. And then the current learning support is where we record and notify customized exam arrangements. So you can see in here that this one, this tells the student would bring with her one-to-one support into the classroom. No, she won't. She's got a learning support assistant in the class. So yes, so if you've got this student in your class, you're going to expect someone to come in to support, so they're not just going to suddenly appear. Do they need signing support? No, they don't. And then the exam arrangements, this one's allowed 25% extra exam. So that's entered by the core team. We're still faced with a problem. How does the teacher know it's there? Because if you're a teacher, you've got maybe 100, 150 individual students scattered across all the courses, and you're not going to go in poking to them. So it would be nice to have some kind of RSS or something like that on it. The way around that we've come up with is we're using Microsoft SQL Server 2014 and reporting servers. I'm saying 2014, I think it works with the last one, but the feature that I'm using specifically is requiring the last 2 issues of SQL Server. I say that the Moodle ILP, or so the Ulcc ILP is great. It is. It's great for entering stuff, for creating forms and entering stuff. It's not so good for getting things out the back. Originally, it was designed to do that. And here's a big hint to all you developers here at ULCC. It'd be great if you could do this. But what I do is a sequence of things. So every night we get a copy of the MySQL ILP tables down from ULCC. We copy those into Microsoft SQL, so because that's the environment in which we work. We have a set of stored procedures that assemble these into tables. Now, ideally, because you can add lots of different items to the form, basically what I do is and each one's got a separate set of tables behind those. I flatten them into a single table. So if I've got a form for current learning support, there's a table, so each record in the table is everything that you saw in one of those. So I do that every night. And it looks like that. You can't see that at all, so forget about that. But basically, it's just a SQL table, and it's got various entries in it that I've pulled together. We do that at about 5 a.m. And then, based upon that, we produce a series of reports in reporting services. If you're not familiar with reporting services, that isn't intended to do that. So a typical report here, this is the top one is the folder. So you can see here that I've got 4 separate reports. The first 3 are based upon the table that you've just seen. So it's a flattened table, and you can represent the data in different ways. You can parameterize it, etc. So the one I've chosen, reporting services, you can parameterize using the network identity of the person. So the computer knows who I am, and I can filter my report based upon that. So in this case, for this student, because I'm no longer teaching, this report never gives me any students. But if I was a teacher, it would just give me the students in whose context I was able to see their information. So it's handling all of that for me as well. And it's automatic because you don't need to log into it because you're already logged into the network. Then So I don't display as a student I teach, and because I don't teach them, it's blank. I can't do anything about that. Even as the iLearn administrator, I can't overwrite this. It's network-based. We're still faced with the problem then, how does the teacher know it's there? Again, we're stuck with that. How does the teacher know where to look? And this is why I'm on SQL Server 2014. It's got a feature in dynamic data-driven subscription. Basically, a subscription to a reporting service thing is, it says, send me it whenever it's new. And historically, you had to actually subscribe to it to get that. Nowadays, using this, provided you've got a record in your table that's got an email address, you can, on the fly, email people who've got changes. So every day, we run these daily, we send them out with all new or changed items. So there's one on target settings where I send an email the day before the target dues up. If they haven't changed it, they get one on the day of the target. If they still haven't changed it, they get one 5 days later, and then they get one every day until they actually do something about it. So there's all that stuff, which as a teacher, I had real problems keeping track of when I'd set targets. And the same kind of thing goes in here. Twice annually, I send them a digest, because, hey, when one of these new things goes up, you remember it, but then twice yearly they'll get a digest, which can point them back to, there is actually a full reporting service available through our browser. And you can also include a field in it with a deep link, so you can go from this report deep into the Moodle ILP, so that instead of them having to log in and find their way through to the particular ILP, it will just bang you straight into the edit page. So it speeds all that process up. This is an example of an email again here. This one's customized. I don't suppose anybody recognizes the user, Jorge Bergoglio? Pope Francis. I try to invent a name for you. And this is an example of an email that I would send out to a teacher, and they'd get this. So the pilot would have had them today. And finally then, once they've done this, we have the issue around for the exam arrangements, how do we get the information back from the teachers about how their learning disability affects them? And so we have this form, and for this I'm using InfoPath, Microsoft InfoPath. In InfoPath form, we have that on all of our machines. And I haven't yet got this hooked up back to the database because it really works in a SharePoint environment, and I'm no SharePoint person. So at the minute, the teacher gets the current learning support email. They open this form, they fill it in and press submit, and it then gets emailed back to the learning support people. And again, there's a big bureaucracy behind that in terms of exam admin. It's a solution, and it's working very smoothly for us at the moment. There you go.
Great, thank you very much.
Good.
I can chair my own session, which means basically we're here for the rest of the evening. 10 minutes, actually. Can you time me? Thank you. All right, although this is about to go off. So, Frank asked me to talk to you. I'm blaming it basically on Frank because I think this is a little bit dull. It's not as good as the presentations we've just seen. But it's about how we're connecting in Bloomsbury 5 separate Moodle instances with a Ulcc Moodle site. So if you're interested in networking Moodles together, this is how we can do it. So my disclaimer is, firstly I need my I'm not really a learning technologist. I mean, I can kind of talk. So the purpose of this presentation is to describe, as I said, how we're connecting the Moodles together, and I'm going to sort of tell you the why we need to do this, what it means, how it's kind of shaped, how we do it, and a few issues that I've come up with. So firstly, the why. So I manage the Bloomsbury Learning Environment, which is a shared e-learning service for these 5 colleges, and some of my colleges are represented today, and if you don't know where they are, just go outside and have a look around one of these buildings, because we're in Bloomsbury right now. So these 5 colleges each have their own instance of Moodle, and each instance is hosted by Ulcc. And each college has its own Moodle instance for flexibility, to ensure branding, to make sure that we've got flexibility with the sorts of plugins that individual colleges want to be using. In addition, we've got SOAS's distance learning provision. We're not going to talk about that now. But that is sort of, I guess, a 7th Moodle instance. And it was kind of part of our negotiation and deal with ULCC that we would be able to go with their hosting service, provided we would be able to network our colleges together. And why? Because we do a lot of collaborating in Bloomsbury. We work well together, and we, including me as a shared member of staff, but we have a lot of sort of projects, and the London International Development Centre, the LIDC, it's a shared research organisation, so all of the colleges have a stake in LIDC. They're all doing research into international development, and this is sort of the melting pot of where it happens. They have a building, so they have members of staff, and it's a proper shared environment. So LIDC, for their members, and their members are staff in the 5 colleges and students and alumni, they needed to have a private space where they could search for each other. So they needed a membership database where they could find each other, find sort of shared common research areas. They needed a space where they could start working together on proposals for grants, but that needed to be somewhere private, not on the sort of public domain. They needed a place to put project documentation, and they needed somewhere to put media assets like recordings of webinars and invited speakers and all sorts. And it kind of made sense for this to be in Moodle because all of these members of staff were already using Moodle, and also it made sense to give them something they could already use their username and passwords. We didn't need to be able to set it up, they needed to manage their own enrolments. They're not learning technologists at all, so it needs to be kind of a low-level sort of non-techie actions they needed to be able to do. And the other requirement, they needed their alumni who didn't have the institutional usernames and passwords anymore, but they needed to be able to have guest accounts. So LIDC staff needed to be able to create these, so self-registration was important to have. So the LIDC course, it's a course, but LIDC don't need it to be a course. It sits on the BLE Hub. The BLE Hub is our 6th Moodle instance, and this is how we're using it. So we have a space for BLE things. So some of my colleagues over there, the learning technologists of the Bloomsbury colleges, we've got some courses where we can put kind of like the boring repository, how not to use Moodle, but we kind of need a place to share materials, minutes of meetings. We have some shared courses. So for example, we put together a Turnitin training course. So it sits on the BLE Hub, but if Linda at SOAS wants to use it, she can just pull it across and put it onto her own instance. So we can develop things together on a shared space. Also, we use it as a space for following up meetings. So we did a face-to-face event on digital literacy, and after the event, we provided a course to our delegates who came from all the colleges. So they needed to go into one central place. We use the hub for other groups across the colleges. So the librarians all have a course on the hub. The careers service, accessibility guys have a shared area, study skills as well, and the research data managers who have nothing to do with Moodle at all, but they just needed somewhere to go centrally. But a lot of collaboration happens, as you can see in Bloomsbury. We used it also for joint courses, and this is kind of the really exciting thing that we desperately needed to have a joint Moodle for, but actually it hasn't been that fully realised. Apart from the Blue, which we ran last summer, which was the Bloomsbury online course, kind of rhymes with MOOC, and that was the bandwagon we were trying to get on. So it was a course that we developed for staff across all the colleges to kind of start thinking about how they could use online learning in their own courses. So we were modelling an online course. So the fourth example of the hub are for open courses. So these 3 colleges, IOE, Birkbeck and LSHDM, they want to be able to have more open courses that non-staff and non-students can access, but they didn't want it on their own Moodle. So by having it on the BLE Hub, where we have enabled self-registration, which we don't have on the other colleges, they were able to use the hub for that. And finally, a testing environment. So we don't have a specific test Moodle environment across the colleges. One of them does, but for the most part, the rest of them don't. So we needed a place where we could test out plugins, test out themes without it causing too much havoc if it went wrong. So what is this thing? Let me show you. So hopefully this is going to be big enough-ish. This is our landing page. We have our own URL for it. And for people to get in, obviously I'm going to pretend to, I'm not doing a live demo because I was too scared, even at ULCC, but we shall pretend. So you click on login and it takes you to a login page. At this point, you've got three options. You can either log in directly onto the hub, which I can do because I'm a site administrator, and some of the guys on that table can do, but we don't have it available to everyone. We can also, on this landing page, you can create your own page, so that's the self-registration, which probably most of you don't have enabled, I would imagine you don't, but we've enabled it here. So you can create an account on this Moodle, or, and this is the clever bit, if you are a member of one of the colleges, you would actually choose your college's Moodle site. So I'm going to pretend that I work at RVC, so I want to go into the RVC's Moodle. So if I click on that link, it takes me to the login page of the RVC's Moodle, which they call RVC Learn. So there you would be able to put in your credentials and it takes you in. So if you see here, it says I'm logged in as Sarah Sherman from RVC Learn. So I'm on the BLE hub, but it's using my credentials from RVC Learn. I told you it was kind of boring, sorry. So how is this possible? How are we able to do this? I need to make sure I don't forget any important information. So this is back in the hub. This is a pretend course I've got called, what it's called dummy course. This is the enrolments method part of the course. So it's where you go under user, so edit settings, user, enrolment methods, and you add the enrolment method, which is called MNet remote enrolments. So I would select it there and choose MNet enrolments there, and you get this screen up, and at this point you can choose who your host is. So I've got the choice of all the Moodles in the Bloomsbury collection, but I'm going for all hosts. I'm not convinced this works. I think I have to do all of them individually, but in theory you would choose one host, which is the Moodle site you want to link it to, and what the role is, the general role. You can change the role later on within the course, but as a standard you can set it here. And once you've chosen all those things, you go back to that enrolment screen and you can see here it says MNet enrolment methods, all hosts is there. If I want to link my dummy course to all the other 5 colleges, I think I have to do it for every one. It doesn't seem to work with all hosts. Emily's nodding, so that's good. So, in terms of enrolling people onto my shared hub course, I've got a few ways, and I've gone to site admin, networking, and remote enrolments client, which is, they're all the menu items here. And here you can see it says, I hope you can see it, it's a bit small, Bloomsbury Learning Environment, so that is the hub. So when I click on edit enrolments, all of the courses on the hub that have been made available are listed. So you have to scroll down to another page, and somewhere here is my dummy course. So I would click on edit enrolments, and then I could do it manually. Obviously you wouldn't want to do that for potentially 200 people, that would be annoying, but in the usual way you could add them on one at a time. Luckily there is a bulk enrolment option. So back in the same place on the RVC site, using as an example, here you would be able to do your bulk enroll. You just create a .csv file if you know who all the users already are, and you can add them in there. Finally, the self-enrollment option is how we got people to enroll onto the Blue. We couldn't do this for them. We didn't know how many people would be signed up for it. Of course, you know, millions. But we enabled the self-enrollment. So we made that URL there was the course URL. When people clicked on it, it took them to an enrollment option. You probably have seen pages that look similar to that. The user, they're not logged in yet because this is on the hub. They would have clicked on continue, and you get to this screen, and they would have chosen their college. Click on the RVC Learn one. I would log into RVC Learn as an academic, and goes back to the BLE hub. There's a lot of clicking, but it kind of makes sense once you go through the process. Then you get the enroll button. So our member of staff would have clicked on enroll and would have got into the course. So we've had a few issues with this, as we do, because this is technology. It involves what I call the Moodle hokey-cokey. As you can see, there's a lot of going backwards and forwards, and you have to log in and log out to make these things work. But I have to go back to my notes a lot. In order to do this presentation, I had to go back to how do you do this in the first place. It's a bit cumbersome, but once you get it, and I have got it, I can probably explain it to others. It's not always consistent, so I'm looking directly at Emily and Dave, wherever you are. I saw you a minute ago. There you are, thank you. So for example, this is SOAS's course. This is me logged into the SOAS Moodle, and I've got your course there, Wadood's course, and the Panopto Working Group course, the ones I'm enrolled on. But these ones here, BleTech, Moodle, those are all the courses that I'm enrolled on from the hub. This is brilliant because as a SOAS member of staff, I would see all my external Ble hub courses, but this doesn't always work. We can't rely on it, and it's really annoying. So when we had the Blue, we had to keep telling people to go to the hub URL. They couldn't rely on going onto their own, and this would kind of be brilliant if this could work. I'll come to you in a minute. I'm nearly done. She's got her hand up there, which is good. So the only other issue I feel that I've got with this is kind of ongoing support. I don't mean ULCC support. I mean support for the remote enrolment client, because you guys didn't develop it. Somebody developed it. James, 3 or 4 years ago, found it for us because it ticked a box. But as I guess we all have using this open source business, nothing's forever, and so I do worry every time we have an upgrade to a new Moodle version, is the MNet enrolment going to work? Because we need it. It's how we connect ourselves as 5 independent colleges. That's it. So we've probably got about a minute. I don't know, I'm chairing this, so yeah, you can talk away. Questions, but remember my disclaimer that I'm not a learning technologist. Emily, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say, I know why that is.
Ah, so you'd be able to fix it for us?
It depends on what course overview and what front page you're using.
Ah, so it's
Not all of the
colleges are using the same thing.
course overview log.
Yeah, even then, I still think it's iffy and not reliable, because sometimes courses don't appear when they should. Anyway, Stephen.
I was going to ask, do you get a list in your BLE of what courses are involved in the hub? And I guess
That it should work.
but you don't. I didn't see it in the My Courses block in the navigation. It's not listed
No,
there.
you don't get it in that one.
No, you have to click on My Courses. You have to click on that. Anything else? No. Okay. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite colleagues from Plymouth to come and tell us about your new arrival onto Moodle.
Thank you. Oh dear.
I'll go stand by the door while you talk. You do that.
Right, where are we? Hello. Firstly, let's do introductions. I'm Rupert Frankham, Technical Project Manager. This is...
I'm Hannah Parsons, Business Analyst and also Proxy Product Owner on this project.
And this is...
I'm Paul Westmore, Interim IT Director at Plymouth University, and I'm only going to speak very briefly. Do you want me to do my bit now?
I'm just going to say that, unfortunately, Janice Button, the 4th member of the core Plymouth team and our digital learning environment product owner, can't be here in person. But before I do begin, I will...
No, it's not, Dave. Okay, very good. I just wanted to set a bit of context. Rupert and Hannah are going to talk to you for hours and hours about the journey we've been on over the last year or so to implement Moodle at Plymouth University. And it's been a very challenging project. It's also been a very successful project. I would say, in the time I've been at Plymouth University, it's the most successful project we've run. We've gone from 2 in-house virtual learning environments consolidated onto Moodle, all in a year. You'll hear some things that didn't go as well as we would have liked, some challenges we've had since we went live, but I'm delighted with the results of the project, and I'm equally delighted with the support and help we've had from ULCC. There have been some bumps along the road. Dave and I have had some arguments over the course of the last year, but generally ULCC have been a tremendous support to us, and we could not have done it without ULCC. And with that, I'm going to hand you over to Rupert and Hannah to talk about the details, and I'll go and see them.
Thank you, Paul.
How did you go?
So, before I do start, I will be reading, because there's a lot of detail in the presentation I'd like to get across. We were initially contacted by Ulcc a few months ago asking us here to present. During that time, we had just delivered our brand new digital learning environment for the start of the academic year, this academic year, or DLE, as it's known in the Southwest, as well as in and around campus. The DLE was delivered using a number of key elements seen on screen. So what story would ULCC want us to tell? Our journey, of course. So this is our journey delivering a DLE across an institution that consists of 30,000 users and rising. So where did it all begin? 18 months ago, Plymouth, we had an in-house developed learning environment hosted on-premise. It was based on the Microsoft SharePoint platform, looking at you, see your reactions there. This system was known as Tulip, which stands for with a few bells and a few whistles. System number 2 in the mix was a bespoke e-submission tool called Scholar. Scholar was being used to facilitate online submissions, marking, and moderation. The third big system included in this journey was Emily, the medical and dental school's managed learning environment, a separate environment due to the nature of the curriculum and cross-section of students, as well as a collaboration with the University of Exeter and the NHS. The Emily system has actually had a colourful background. It was originally on Blackboard and had migrated a few years ago to our SharePoint platform. The challenge, but more formally the scope, was to bring 2 institution learning environments into one single environment with an integrated e-submission tool. But this was far from the complete vision. The first hurdle was to define the somewhat overwhelming task ahead. The vision will hopefully become clear during this presentation. All I will declare now is that it was a digital learning environment that encompassed numerous integrations with new and existing services and systems, all with the student experience at the heart of the development and at the heart of the solution. Just with that high-level vision, the business knew a change was required. Tulip had been in existence for a while, and surely the institution only required one environment and not 3 separate systems. Overall, that benefited the business. I've somewhat understated the vision. This, in truth, was months, if not years, of lessons learnt from own experiences and others too. In actual fact, the vast amount of background work had already been done by Professor Neil Witt and his team over a number of years.
So that's on to me. So you obviously can't see that very well, so I'm going to try and describe it a little bit. So the idea behind this was the main thing that we had to get right was the single sign-on element. So a lot of our core systems are all disparate systems, and each one you have to sign into. So that was the key focus, and that's the red ring that you can see just above the sort of paler green. At the centre of that is the managed learning environment, which is obviously now Moodle, and the sort of darker green colour, those are our core teaching and learning systems, as well as where we get our data feeds, also our student record system, and other system timetabling, etc. As Rupert said, it's Neil's vision, and his main focus really was to try and not focus on the product. So cool things like reading lists. So we used Talis Aspire, but we market it as a reading list, and we use Turn It In, and all of those are in the arranged section within the single sign-on. So those are the kind of key things. In the recommended section, which is the kind of paler blue, are the things that we recognise as being pieces of software that students are using, things like Facebook, Twitter. So although we can't actually physically have any sort of single sign-on to those, they're recognised as pieces of software that, and tools that people use. And then there's the blue sky horizon scanning, which I have to admit, I can't even read what that one says. So I think those are the kind of main things. Like I said before, the plug-and-play approach. So if we're finding that something like the Talis Aspire isn't working for us and there's something better out there on the market, then we can kind of plug and play with those things. And that's why we're kind of calling it reading list as opposed to Talis Aspire. I think that covers everything there.
So why Moodle? Following educational sector research and experiences from other institutions, Moodle was chosen as the platform of choice. The sector, although utilising other platforms such as Blackboard, is in majority using Moodle. It was an attractive decision with the built-in assignment tools, and as an aside, but an important factor, the university had just been through a considerable restructure. An outcome of this restructure was to review the entire technical infrastructure. With this on the horizon, and with limited Moodle experience in-house, the business required a procurement exercise that included hosting services, development resource, and Moodle expertise. After collating the business's high-level requirements, we went to tender with our extremely large scope, including areas that had limited definition and yet to be fully defined. Following a successful tender process, we were pleased to contract ULCC. We contracted ULCC for both the hosting services and the development work, which also came with their Moodle expertise and experience. A further discovery and definition exercise followed, with membership and input from both Plymouth and ULCC. The aim here was to agree top-level areas such as timescales, the next academic year, along with the implementation strategy that would be used. I think at this point, this is where Plymouth wanted to clearly divert from the stereotypical waterfall delivery method. In addition to the infrastructure review, the IT department in Plymouth have been working hard to instil Prince2 governance for projects and, more relevant, the Scrum Agile delivery methodology. As a newly qualified Prince2 practitioner, I was using Prince to manage the project, but agreements were made by both Plymouth and ULCC to deliver the solution using Scrum Agile.
I was coming in because Rupert was a newly appointed project manager and I was a developer, and Paul approached me and said, would you like to have a go at being a business analyst? And I said, yes, Paul, that'd be lovely. Could I start on a nice small project, compact scope? He said, yes, of course. How about the DLE? So it was a very challenging project for both of us. Thank you, Paul.
This brings me on to the team, the family, that came together to deliver the DLE, which for completeness consisted of our Scrum Master, Dev, based in London here at ULCC with the majority of the development team. Janice, our product owner in Plymouth with teaching and learning experience. Hannah, our proxy product owner in Plymouth with technical experience. Thomas, our lead developer, and Marie, our designer, both in London. Sylvia, our tester in London, with input from our test manager, Mike, in Plymouth. The family of developers also grew with Matt and Nigel joining the development team. All this creating a single delivery team, the family, for the next 9 or so months. In addition, there was me in my role as project manager and an additional business analyst who joined the team in May. Plymouth also co-opted expertise from the then student record system team. Let us not forget Richard, who provided expertise wherever it was needed, or even just a sounding board when required. And as I say, this made up the Scrum team, the Scrum family. But as with any project, this grew and changed organically over time. However, there were members of an extended family. We had digital skills expertise in the project room based in Plymouth to deliver training to the academic community. We also utilised expertise such as system admin from across both ULCC and Plymouth. As part of the delivery model for the project, Plymouth had invested in 10 DLE advocates whose role it was to be out in the field working with the academic staff, supporting and advertising the new service. The advocates made up a quarter of the dedicated faculty teams that were in place. These teams also included digital skills developers, information specialists, and learning technologists. This was led by Professor Neil Witt, Head of Academic Support, Technology and Innovation, or ASTI, and more importantly, the visionary to the DLE. This dedicated team approach was to ensure academic community had the best possible start in utilising the DLE right from the outset. These teams were to be vital in the coming months. During the finer discussions, aka contract finalisation, which unfortunately took longer than expected, we had to make a decision on the version of Moodle that the institution would be using, along with the implementation of a new institutional-wide repository, this being based on the Aquella platform from Pearson. So let's add one more team member to the Scrum family and documentation areas. Delivery finally started on the 9th of December 2013 with Sprint 0. The clock was now ticking, with 9 months to deploy a full DLE ready for the next academic year. This was made all the more terrifying by horror stories from other institutions reporting having started years ago with a similar vision, but only 1 or 2% complete on their content migration. The challenge had definitely been set. Just before Christmas 2013, 12 months to day, give or take, we had achieved setup and a skeleton infrastructure was in place. The skeleton infrastructure also came with a basic non-designer designed theme that I think Thomas was quite pleased with.
It was ugly.
This was actually a great start. Well, apart from the 20,000 emails being sent during the first data pool from Plymouth. All this on the Moodle install due to the mail setting being on. Students had no idea that we were developing a new learning environment just for them. They did now. This brings me on to one key area of Scrum-based delivery, the all-important stories. These are critical to delivery. Stories are meant to be short, sharp development pieces. They range in both size in terms of effort and business value. As part of this, you have a backlog of stories to achieve and an icebox full of stuff that you could possibly do. Arguably the project scope, which is what we had, an icebox but a limited backlog with even less well-defined stories. The stories needed to be fleshed out. This was to be the theme for the majority of the project. But saying this, I believe that can be said for any Scrum project.
And I just wanted to talk about the stories a little bit because they were the responsibility really of Janice and myself. And I think it's fair to say that it was a struggle at first, and there were some quite badly written stories. And to stress how important writing stories is it was just so important because of the split location. It's really our only method of communication to the developers. So if you think you've written it correctly and the developers start developing it, and then we find out that they didn't, we didn't fully understand it, didn't quite write the story correctly. So I can't stress enough how important it was. And I'll hold my hand up and say that some of the stories were brilliant. I'm sure they were. I say the majority of them were sort of mediocre, and there were some quite poor ones as well. Quite often it was a time thing. So if you had a bit of time, then you could actually really focus on writing really good stories. But quite often it would be a very quick. Someone's mentioned something. You think, oh, that's a brilliant requirement. I've got to get that down. So you quickly write it down. Think, I'll come back to that later and I'll flesh that out. And you kind of never ever do. You never get back to it. We used a tool called Pivotal Tracker to keep our stories, and we could all log in there as a web-based tool. And I think keeping the stories up to date as well. So when we have a conversation, I don't know if I can't remember if we mentioned it yet, but we used Google Hangouts to have our meetings with developers at Ulcc, and quite often we would have a conversation about a story and move on. And I think, right, I'll go back to that and I'll add that, I'll add that in, and you just don't.
For those that know Scrum, you know that fail fast and minimum viable product, or MVP, are two key elements that drive delivery. For those that don't, Scrum relies on delivering direct to scope and only to explicit details, e.g. the stories. The minimum possible option and ready to deploy for use by your users. In addition, use 2-week iterations to deliver something, and when I say something, I mean the items of greatest priority and of business value to your stakeholders. This means you are realistically only 1 iteration, or 2 weeks, off track if not delivering to your users' needs. Every 2 weeks, Hannah and Janice had the daunting task of presenting what had been delivered to the project stakeholders, which at times was stressful. More on that later. Anyway, these were the show and tells, mainly consisting of staff initially, as we had something else planned for our students. One of the key components behind the project was to ensure student input into the look, feel and function of the DLE. After all, it is theirs. So to the students, our customer, we undertook several student workshops from January up until May this year. This included general stuff, and if you could have it, what would it be? In addition, we also targeted design and usability. We commissioned sessions that were run by Ulcc's designer Marie and her colleague. These sessions were actually found to be invaluable, as the project team could draw upon quotes and references along the way. An example quote being, "I don't know when computers were first invented, but was Tulip designed then?" This was a telling sign that the DLE was very much welcome. Following another Scrum principle, the project aimed to release to a core group of staff members from across the university right at the start of development. This group would be known as the early adopters. We had planned for this to be January, but given delays with complex structures and data feeds, which is a phrase I've learned to hate, it wasn't achieved until mid-February. However, it's worth pointing out at this time, the team, the family, were fairly new to Agile, the Scrum in particular, So when I say delays in allowing early adoption access, this was actually due to the team as a whole wanting to release a polished and somewhat finished core system. This goes against countless Scrum principles, and when reminded of this by those wiser than us, looking at you, Paul, at this point in time, we reverted some unfinished items and released it to phase 1 of the early adopters, about 30 to 40 academic staff in all. The early adoption process was, in hindsight, one of the most important aspects to the success of the delivery of this project. It consisted of 6 phases that added another 20 to 30 people to the system every 1 or 2 weeks. The reason it was so critical was the fact it allowed a control group of people on the system that in turn would then provide feedback during and in the 2-week sprints. This all starting to model, shape and prioritise functionality and developments for us. Of course, people disagreed with what was higher priority, but they could have that discussion openly in public. I can't remember any fights breaking out or indeed riots, but there were certainly strong claims made from all angles of the university with rationale behind each one. Given the horror stories on content previously mentioned, the faculty teams were even more critical. They were working wonders with the early adoption scheme and the early adopters. The benefit to this was each phase of early adopters we added, the more advocates we had and the more voices we had at the show and tells, slowly but surely creating a buzz around the institution and for the project. The faculty teams were working hard, keeping up with the delivery and explaining delays where delays were. This brings me on to a negative. This, I believe, could be summarised as overcommitting to developments, which I think it's fair to say happened quite a bit. You could argue that this was a result of a pushy customer, but there are a lot of variables involved in knowing what is required at every turn. The issue here relates again to MVP, or minimum viable product, and delivering small bite-sized pieces and not all that could possibly be required. Of course, we had delays, what project doesn't, but on tight timescales we were working to, this had greater impact and was only going to be magnified. So what of our development history? This is our project delivery burn chart, showing the velocity of delivery and story points achieved over time. The chart shows lines top to bottom and total story points achieved each sprint or 2 weeks. Overall, 25 sprints with 710 story points. The chart shows that the project failed to meet the expected milestones and release targets until September, the hard deadline that had been set. However, having said this, overall the team slowly increased the number of stories delivered over time within any 2-week period until the start of the academic term. What isn't shown is the number of members of the Scrum team at any given time, which of course has an impact. No developer, no story points. This brings me on to the live service. To give you a break from our voices, here's a short video advertising the DLE that went live on the 22nd of September, and we are going to try and demo it live. So hopefully, we got...
The university has been busy over the summer, undertaking lots of building work to transform the digital systems university-wide to create a...
Do you have sound at all?
So I wasn't told there's any videos.
It is plugged in there now. I wonder where the projector was. I was looking earlier on and I was thinking, where is it? It's back there.
This is where you need to practice your interpretive dance.
Okay, talk briefly about the show and tell.
Yeah.
So, as Rupert said, is it? Should we play?
I'm just trying to see. It should be. That's on the microphone. That's one. Try that. Might be a bit loud. You sound that? Sorry, I've done that. Let me do another.
Let's give it a go. Yeah, that's mine.
Give me a set, I can wind it back out.
Well, we can play it at the end, perhaps.
Yeah,
We'll carry on, and then,
Okay.
if not, we can give the link.
So, don't live demo. So what I was going to say is, as you can hopefully see, the service is made up of a number of key areas, which it is, and integration points, let's call them branches for argument's sake. These branches came in different forms, from standard plug-in and play to bespoke developments for us in Plymouth. An example of this is the module information block. As you should have heard in the video, this is available on all course pages and provides a standard set of data to the student cohort. The information contained here came directly from student feedback. They wanted to quickly see core term dates, submission deadlines, teaching staff, and contact information. This was a bespoke development utilising the data feeds from our student record system. Another bespoke development and a benefit against the project, which would use the data mechanism but in the other direction, so to Plymouth from London, was with marks or grades being sent back into our student record system, saving time on manual, repetitive tasks and data entry. This development is still being refined, as there too were ambiguities in the stories, but have actually been identified through the use of the DLE. One core integration was with Campus M, or as Plymouth residents know it, the mobile with app. This was key. It would allow students to quickly check, view and access information from their ever-growing number of devices. So what of the DLE from the start of term? We have seen the DLE's use increase over the past months, which is to be expected with module starting delivery in August. But on Monday the 6th of October, or should I say the infamous 6th of October, at 9 o'clock in the morning, we had a major incident. 681 people all logged in at the same time, and unfortunately the system stopped responding. We had what was essentially an outage for 4 hours, during which time we had a hive of activity to restore service. It's fair to say at this point, we have not had 681 people all logged in at the same time on the system again. Well, not yet, anyway. Moving forward to the present day, and since the 6th of October, the infamous 6th of October, the service has experienced fluctuation in performance. As you can hopefully see, indicated by the fact that not all users seem to be affected. Some students completely oblivious to the performance-based issues, but on the flip side, members of staff finding it difficult to use the DLE. As the reports came in, and as the weeks went on, no permanent resolution could be identified, due to the sporadic bursts of either great performance or poor performance affecting user experience. Investigations and monitoring continued. The tool fluctuated with performance-based issues. Overall, the impact experience probably only added up to hours of poor performance. As the situation unfolded, there were inconsistent spikes in performance. By this I mean users were experiencing slow page loads and at times bursts of fair performance. This, I believe, for the want of a better word, was bizarre. We were regularly checking our monitoring board. This board displays various statistics on performance. With every report or support call received, the issue was investigated, and we, by this I include members of both Plymouth and ULCC, immediately made configuration changes, which initially helped, but unfortunately didn't wholly resolve the overarching issue. A task group was formed with members once again from ULCC and Plymouth. With this task group in place, a list of potential changes were identified and slowly, in a controlled manner, implemented, including a complete database re-import, which along with some database configuration changes has improved service as we stand here today. As I say, I am pleased to report that we have seen a steady performing system for a few weeks now. In addition, we have also identified further work to continue service improvement. I can also announce that the issue was officially closed on Friday. This was achieved by the dedication of the task group, Thomas, Emily, Dave, and many more. Another core branch of the DLE was a campus subscription to lynda.com. This was to provide two important elements into the project. The first, a campus subscription to lynda.com for all staff and students, but secondly, a complementary training suite with the all-important Moodle course, which could be added to the faculty team toolbox to support the implementation of Moodle across the large institution. The Moodle Essentials course available on lynda.com is still the most viewed item. At the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned Aquella. I think it's fair to state that we have one of the most integrated repositories, our resource store, based on the Aquella platform. This resource store development and implementation came with its own challenges, and of course, a third supplier, who was based in Mallorca, or at times some other country not in the UK, the integration seamless to the user. This meant core developments needed to happen. This added to both the timescales and the complexity of the solution.
I just wanted to talk about Aquella briefly. So I did the requirements gathering, and although SharePoint is well hated, I believe probably the best way to describe it at our institution, there were some features that people actually did like, and that was things like versioning control of documents. So I added it in as a requirement when we did the initial documentation. And Ulcc came back with Equella as a proposal, as a separate, a third system. We were very keen on it when we saw it, but I think it's fair to say that Paul and Neil were quite keen to integrate it as much as possible. And we were concerned that we were bringing in a new Moodle system and a resource store, Equella, and we didn't want to scare users off too much. So a lot of work has gone on to integrating it with Moodle as seamlessly as possible. So again, it's got the single sign-on. It does actually, out of the box, integrate well with Moodle anyway. But we wanted to make it look a bit more like Moodle as well. So the branding is very similar to our core Moodle. And as Rupert said, Clem was based in Mallorca, so it was another added complexity. I never actually managed to hop onto a plane to go over there to visit him and in person. And I was saying that face-to-face is quite important, but that never actually arrived, which is a bit of a shame. So yeah, it was a complicated thing to set up. What should I say? So we called it the resource store. So we were bearing in mind that with Talis Aspire, we wanted a sort of reading list. I mentioned it earlier on. We were calling it the resource store. It was an extra that we weren't necessarily actually prepared for. We were prepared for the Moodle side of things, but the training team had to account for creating some learning resources for that. And there was also the question of why can't we just upload a document into Moodle? That's what it's there for. But also the idea behind the resource store is that those documents are reusable and you can link to them from any course, and obviously if you update that document in Equella, it will update in all the different places that you've linked to it from. So from a business benefit and from a lecturer's benefit, it has massive benefits for the institution.
So on to the aftercare, which has been a turbulent journey in itself, not least for the performance fluctuation. Given the complexity of the service and the size of the institution, this is one big lesson from the project. More on that in a bit. With the institution of our size, we have varying technical capabilities and understanding. On top of this, we have just changed the biggest service, or three, throughout the institution. One immediate lesson is the information shared on and by both service desks on each side, both Plymouth and Ulcc. This could, I think it fair, be better, providing more details on initial incident reports and more data in the responses. This would help the investigation process and provide a resolution or communication back to the customer in a timely manner. So what do our students think? Initial feedback has generally been positive, and the same three things are mentioned. The timetabling information is too complicated to understand. It's fairly slow at times, this being the aforementioned performance, and my lecturers all use the DLE in different ways. So to cover these off, timetabling, we have a project initiating to look at the timetabling data. In fact, it's Hannah's next project, just another uncomplicated project. As you have heard, the performance has been resolved, and the third is the hardest. Working with the Students' Union, we will continue to promote the DLE and its offerings. This in turn will allow the students a voice to try and improve the level of use on a course-by-course basis. It's early days yet, but initial reactions, thoughts and comments are extremely positive. Quotes such as, "It works, it looks great, everything is in one place, and lastly, it's so much better than Tulip," give us a good indication. But we'll have to await the official student survey due early 2015. Overall, engagement and activity from all 5 of our faculties has been higher than expected, and with continued advocacy, this is only going to grow and increase. For core Moodle, we have seen 22,000 distinct users having accessed the system between September and November, a peak of 10,500 users on one Friday, and an average of 9,000 users on any weekday. The resource store had 30,000 resources added in October and November, 460,000 resources viewed in October and November, and overall 48,000 current resources. In true Prince2 terms, what are the lessons learnt? As mentioned, Prince2 was used to govern this project, and the argument of how does Prince work with Agile still remains. Management. want to know deadlines and delivery milestones, which on a Scrum project are different with each sprint. The priorities change and possibly new functionality is identified, the evolving nature of a Scrum project. A technique used not just by us on this project, but on projects within the university, was a sprint release planner. This highlighted the headline expectations from each sprint. I believe this is actually the link between Prince and Agile. On the Agile side, and as I say, both parties were fairly new to Scrum delivery, and added to this the split location complexity, Plymouth, London, and of course Mallorca. I'd be lying if I said that the split location didn't have a considerable impact on delivery. But Google Hangouts, previously mentioned, worked a treat for daily stand-ups, our morning catch-ups on progress and planned activities, as well as a quick communication.
It quickly became apparent that part of the Agile process is to do planning and also story grooming, backlog grooming. The stand-ups were 15 minutes in the morning, and they worked really well on Google Hangouts. The planning sessions could be anywhere between 2, 3, 4 hours long. And I don't know if any of you have sat with headphones on with a large group of people with just little faces in the bottom. I don't know if anyone's used Hangouts or anything sort of software similar to that. But spending 4 hours on using that and trying to plan your next 2 weeks of work was very, very difficult. At times frustrating, and at times, at the end of it, we came off and head in hands thinking, God, that was awful. That was just the worst experience ever. And it wasn't really probably the best use of our time. At the start of the project, Janice and I and Rupert, we would come up for a day or two, maybe 6 weeks, and sometimes the ULCC would come down to us. I say it soon became apparent that we needed to have that more face-to-face time. I can't like the stories, writing good stories. I think on an Agile project, that face-to-face, being in the same room, was so important. So rather than coming up for a longer length of time, Janice and I would get the 5:53 train from Plymouth on a Tuesday and try and fit it all in one day, which was tiring, but definitely worthwhile. So we came up every 2 weeks on a Tuesday, say the 5:53 train, which is a lovely journey all through. I don't know if anyone's been down the southwest, but it's a pleasant way to get to work. But I can't say more than face-to-face with Agile. It was the one thing that I think if we could do it again, we would start from right now. We would come up more often and make sure that we make use of that face-to-face time.
Plymouth also saw an increase in productivity with a dedicated project room, where we could plaster the walls with drawings, cards, diagrams, and at times MVP or business benefit reminders, with the odd quote of the week too. I don't know when computers were invented, but was Tulip designed then? From the early adoption phase of the project, we scheduled weekly updates with members of the faculty teams, and although these were expensive in terms of resource in one place, and the questions and actions resulting, they were invaluable to get even more feedback, to add back into the project. This was also time to reflect upon achievements and further communicate issues and known errors. As for the core Scrum development team, I believe we would all agree that retrospectives were underused as potential changes. I personally put the underutilisation of retrospectives down to the timescales and our split location, but hindsight or retrospective is a wonderful thing. Early on and towards the end of the delivery cycle, it was extremely hard to present some of the behind-the-scenes work to an audience that wanted to see something. Users really aren't interested in data feeds. It means little to them unless they see something. The fact that they successfully logged in and it knew who they were and gave them a role with core information along with access to their courses was completely missed, which is a hard sell at times. This is something that Janice and Hannah had to overcome on a regular basis.
Usually the morning of the show and tells were quite stressful and quite a lot of anxiety flying around, partly because of what Rupert's just mentioned. For the first, I think, probably 2 or 3 sprints, there was a lot of work done with data feeds, and people would turn up expecting, I think, to say, right, you've got the go-ahead now to log in, and we couldn't do that just yet. There was very little to actually physically show them on screen. So we took the approach of using it as a bit more of let the digital skills team show a bit of functionality each time, because it was new to the whole institute. A few people have used it before from previous roles, but so showing things like the assignment tool and the feedback tool, and just having little snippets of demonstration and loose on the system. We utilise those show and tells. On some of the data we got further in, and we only had one developer at the beginning of the project, and we didn't saw it then when we play.
this presentation, and I've put right down here, I was through a stage of early life support into business as usual. More bugs and tweaks were identified throughout the system, some of which should have been identified before going live, which had an impact on this transition to business as usual, as there were, and arguably still are, knowledge gaps. These all take considerable amount of time to resolve and continue. Janice would say everything is better after a Nando's. The revelation of a katsu curry changed a London lunch time. I think Hannah would agree.
Love it.
Coffee will keep you going. This was my personal daily, weekly, monthly necessity. And I think the entire team would agree when I say there's always the need for cake. And a warning, if you become a product owner at Plymouth, you may end up pregnant. The website product owner gave birth a month ago, and Janice is due in February. But on to a serious note. Think of the future from the start. Janice, our product owner, has another role to go back to, aside from being a first-time mum, with a lot of knowledge having been built up. Include support right at the start of delivery, include the people who are going to run the service. There's nothing greater than a whiteboard scribble to clear up confusion. Diagrams certainly help. There's no stupid questions, just questions. There's no such thing as too much communication, especially face-to-face. That was our journey, and with that, I really do mean both Plymouth and ULCC. That was our journey. Yes, a turbulent one, but with communication and dedication from the entire family, the team, and extended family, the DLE was delivered.
Sound a bit like the mafia.
So what of the future? The future of the service, the DLE, is bright. This is actually only the start. The service can now expand and mature, arguably organically, with future ambitions already on the horizon. Like the previously mentioned timetabling project, or our already delivering CRM tool, or maybe the new automated lecture capture system. In addition, the mobile arena is going to grow and improve as more and more students take the mobile-first approach. Even during project closure, conversations on advanced e-submission took place. One thing is for sure, we are now able to collect information on learning and reinvest that back into the heart of the university to improve the student experience. Overall, we have the roots of a service that the business can now grow and develop. A living, learning environment that was shaped by its community. So, before we take you into the DLE, hopefully we've got time, some final items to highlight. The DLE was delivered by team dedication, team flexibility, communication, user support, and user feedback. This is what I'm going to hand over to you.
Oh, really?
If you want to try and log in on my demo.
Is that not a link? Is that at 12? F11? There we go. So this is our DLE. Not quite sure what you would like to see, if anything, but you might just want to have a look at how we've styled it. A few people will see this PSND navigation, as Rupert mentioned earlier on. We've got the medical school who have come across into this one system, but it still proved to be quite, I'm going to say, traumatic experience putting across but they use a completely different model to sort of regular module delivery. They use a spiral curriculum, and to complicate things, their modules aren't stored in our record system, so they can't be pulled across in the feed. So we've had to create a kind of a separate feed for those guys. So when users who are part of the medical school log in, they'll see this menu here. So that's not necessarily something that a lot of people would see. We've got a nice little slider up here, which slides, should do. Slides across, which links off to certain things. Thomas, our developer, is still working on this at the moment so that we can automate this and actually upload our own images to this. We'll have a quick look at the module. Pick a module in it. might show you the module information block, which was one of the key requirements that came out of speaking with students. So in Tulip, there was no real structure to how a course could be created. So anybody could put anything anywhere. And students complained about that, and they said that what they would really like is just a key information. We've got module handbooks, they're in a Word document, so they're not overly accessible to students. The information isn't very easy to find. So a lot of work has gone into trying to automate this process of putting in some module information. I think staff weren't quite so keen on this because they were thinking that it was duplicating data because, well, we've already got it in the module handbook, why do we need to put it here? So where possible, we've automated it and pulling it in from our student record system, which is Unity. So things like the module name, the module code, credit rating, the module leaders, that's all pulled in from Unity. As is the teaching staff, that's generated from the lecturers that are enrolled on a course. This one hasn't obviously got any others. Aims and learning outcomes, now that's something where the lecturer would actually have to either copy and paste that in themselves. These other ones are also ones that they would have to edit the information themselves. And then the schedule of summative assessment, that was one of the key things that the students also wanted to know was what am I being assessed on, when, and it's not seem to be no, okay, live demos, panic. So this is also pulled in from our student record system, so it tells them that there's a piece of coursework that makes up 50% of the full 60% of their, so hopefully it makes sense to the student. One of the things that we weren't aware of when we started off, that actually people would be interested in a program level, so we've got programs as well. In Tulip there was a kind of program level information block which showed all of the core and optional modules that program had. That wasn't really on our radar, but as part of the show and tell sessions, that was fed back to us that actually that would be really important. So we developed a program information block as well, which did those things. It listed all the modules, the core modules and the optional modules, so that people can navigate around. One of the other requirements that we went back and forth on a little bit was in SharePoint, you can have like an authorized user role, which Moodle also has. But it allowed everybody to go into every other module that they ever wanted to. So if a student was particularly interested, they're doing computing, but they wanted to have a look at some law stuff. I'm not sure why they would want to do that, but they could do that, and so could staff. As Moodle's not set up like that, you are enrolled on a module, as I'm sure you're, or a course. You have that enrollment in that course. We decided that it probably wouldn't be we wouldn't be able to deliver that as a pro, and we sort of fed that back at show and tells, and people seemed generally okay with that. And then again, as the show and tells went on, we found out that actually we really did need to open it up again to staff and students. So we've hijacked the authorised user role, so people can actually roam. We're calling it like a roaming access. So they're able to roam into all other modules and all other programs on Moodle, but they can't take part in any of the activities, which seems to be going down quite well. We haven't heard any sort of negative feedback, which is generally what we tend to hear. So no one's screaming and shouting about that, and it didn't seem to affect the performance. It wasn't that in the end, was it? So that seems to be working quite well. I don't know if anybody wants them to see anything in particular about Moodle.
No, I make them out of result of questions, if there are any questions.
Yes,
Excellent.
we on our journey, so it was interesting and reminds me of, nightmares. As we've got anything they want to maybe suggest now that we're all a bit further on? Okay, well, thank you both so much for coming again after, I hope you don't have to go up at 5 to 6.
No.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of this Christmas special, as we called it. It's usually a half-day event, but as a special, bringing both FE and HE together, we made it a full day. So thank you all very much for coming. I'm sure Frank will be following up with an email to everybody on the mailing list, not just things of this session. Yeah. Oh no. have told me. That brings us to the end of this Christmas special, as we called it. It's usually a half-day event, but as a special, bringing both FE and HE together, we made it a full day. So thank you all very much for coming.